Hello, welcome to Walsall United WFC.
Hello, welcome to Walsall United WFC. In case you're wondering, John is joining us. He's running a little bit late from his job. Ben Pearce actually said on the 1 year anniversary show we did the other day that John works too many hours. Here he is again, working too many hours, and he's going to be a few minutes' time. So we'll wait for John to join us. But Catherine is with us. Thanks for coming back on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back on. It's been a while.
Nice one. Yes, it has indeed. We'll dive straight into it then. I think so. Over the next few days, we're going to be wrapping up last season and looking ahead to the Euros. Obviously, we've done a few shows on that. Last week, we talked about kind of favourite moments and goals and things like that. Today, we're just going to talk about some of the positives from last season, taking them into next season. And then next week as well, we're going to do our player of the season. And that will be that then. Looking at last season, we start looking ahead then. But we'll start with what's on the thumbnail, because one positive that we did have from last season was Vilde Barrisa. Now, there was a lot of hype around her. Now, that it was the worst kept secret in football history from what I've been told and remember that she was coming to United. Me and Catherine were just talking about this backstage. We saw her kind of at the start of the season. Then she kind of fell out of favour, didn't play a few games. Then when we went on that good run, she featured very heavily in that and then couldn't really get back into the side after that. So I'll just start with Barrisa, Catherine. I mean, you might completely disagree and say she's not a positive from last season, but I think, where do you kind of stand on her then? Because on the thumbnail it says that she deserves more time, or she should be starting more games next season. Are you on board with that one?
I mean, I do think that she was a great catch for United, but the shocker is just how few games she has actually started. I think part of that is with Skinner's system, where do you play her without displacing either Gronin or Zellem? Like he tends to like her more up, but then you have to displace Tooney. So it really is this question of, okay, you've got a very good player, but she hasn't been utilized in the position. She's mainly been utilized as a super sub. So I'd say she's a positive, but a positive to a certain level because she's been more of a substitute than a starter. And in that position, can you really have like an overall view comparing her to like Zellem, for example? Or so in the next year, especially, I think if you want to hold on to her, she needs to become a starter. One, to see if she has the capacity to be a starter, but also she's on a 2-year contract that ends next year. She's going to be 27, turning 28 just after the season. So it's probably going to be her last big contract, unless she can stay fit. She's not going to want to stay with her class at a club that's not starting her regularly, arguably for the talent she has. So, she's difficult because she has the capacity to be great for United, but to be great for United, you have to play regularly, and I don't think she's utilized enough.
100%. One of the things that we've been told from people that know her personally as well, and have spent a lot of time with her, is she is the biggest winner that you'll ever meet. And at United, she's going to need that. If we're not going to push on into next season and really go for things, then I can't see players like her wanting to stick around either. It's an interesting one that you mentioned there, because like you said, she hasn't started too many. I don't know the exact figure into the start, but we saw her
started 8 games. She's come on as a substitute in 9, so she has less than 700 minutes this season in the WSL, excluding the cup games. So
that's interesting, considering I don't remember her ever picking up a massive injury. I don't think she was signed. I think she was in the squad for pretty much every game, from what I remember.
She was named for every game this season, but she played all but 5, I believe.
Yeah, because I'm just looking at it now. So, like I said, one of the positives, like I said, from her, when we went on that great run, started at Brighton with a 2-0 win down there. She got her goal down there. Then we played Villa 5-0, Birmingham 5-0, Tottenham 3-0. She got a goal in that one as well. Why do you think maybe it didn't quite work out towards the end of the season? Because, like I said, after that great run of games, obviously we had that moment, obviously with Arsenal in the Conte, then got knocked out by Chelsea in the Conte, and since then, I mean, I'm just looking now, she didn't start a single game for the remaining 5 fixtures. Then it's a little bit strange, isn't it, that she didn't come back in for all of her talent. She couldn't find a way back into the starting 11.
Like, my theory is that Skinner does have this system which he keeps going to. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah. You
Sorry,
froze for a little bit then.
I'm gonna jump out. I think she's more of a supplier than a scorer, but to be a supplier in where her qualities are, you need to have out and out strikers, which isn't something that United necessarily has. So if he's putting somebody like that who doesn't necessarily have a target, he has to drop somebody. And the logical person, you said push Tooney out to the inside, but Tooney, that was the third biggest supplier of goals this year. If you push her out to the outside, then you're actually losing where she supplied the majority of the goals that she scored. So I'm wondering if you looked at that and said, it's actually more inefficient, because arguably to compete for those top two positions, especially, United's going to need to score more. So you can't take somebody who's actually being somewhat effective. I would argue, like you had mentioned it, Tooney was less effective in the second half of the season when it came to scoring. I think he just kept holding on, thinking maybe she'll get back on a run like she was at the beginning of the season. And in that case, there's really no space if you have Zelen and Gronenbach just behind her to put Borusa. I do think it's a system thing. It's the way that Skinner is playing them. She's better for him as a super sub because she is somebody that he can rely on a number of positions that she will be able to help close out a game, which is important. But again, for her, probably not, especially if she is a winner, like you say, not the expectation that I would imagine she has for herself at any club.
Yeah, and ultimately you've got to be, I think she is. I'm not saying that she's not, but obviously you've got to be better than the person ahead of you in your position to force your way in. Lance was talking there about this, this whole the 6-8-10 conversation that you hear a lot. Obviously, a lot of people I think would agree that Ladd is 6. I don't think there's any argument in that. But then you've got your 8 and your 10. Now, I don't actually think 8s and 10s are that different. 10s just don't track back as much as a number 8 does. But I think Borusa can do both. I think she can. I don't know. I hope I'm not disrespecting Tooney here, but I think she can. Towards the end of the season, I think this is something Skinner for next season needs to look at potentially. I don't know whether you agree with this, but when Tooney was a little bit off form towards the end of the season, I think that's where you put Borusa in a position, because then you can play. Obviously, I know we had injuries at the back, so Ladd dropped back. But you could have a midfield then of Zelen, Jackie, and Borusa, and Tooney just on the bench for a game or so, because it wasn't really working towards the end of the season for her. She was trying things that wasn't really coming off. I think the West Ham game was the moment where I looked at it, I thought she's not quite right, Tooney. But yeah, that's what I mean. Surely there's a place for Borusa there.
I do, but I think like an 8 or a 10 is less effective in Skinner's system because he's playing 1-3-2. So he's got those double pivots. He's got kind of these wingers that come in. And so that classic 8-10 doesn't fit in the same way as if you had like a diamond midfield, for example, or you just had 1-6. So she is, in fact, less effective because there's two people behind her kind of pushing up. I don't know. I do think it's maybe because he looked at the personnel he had and her best qualities just don't fit into the system, or she might have been surpassed at the beginning of this season by players who are already established in the past. So it'll be an interesting one to see how the personnel changes and if he's going to stick to the system next year, which I would argue he can't if he wants to push up in the top 3 or top 2. It's going to be an interesting one next year. But this year, I just think it was the personnel he had and how he wanted to play. Sadly, she's one of those players who never really had a cemented spot because of her best qualities and how he sets up.
I think you could say that for a couple of the players. Before I open up the next conversation, I think you could say that for a couple of players because Zelem's been moved around a lot. Ladd obviously got dropped back into defence. Tooney's played 4 different positions this season. Martha Thomas has been all over the place. And before I bring you back in on that, we do have our actual host has finally joined us. So I thought I'd bring him back in and swap us around.
Sorry guys, I was supposed to finish work at 7, finished a little bit later, so I just couldn't get home quick enough. But first of all, great to see Catherine back on the show. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good. So I see you again.
Yeah, and you was in England. I don't know if you've had that conversation already, but we've got to get that out there. If you had said that it was in Birmingham, I would have actually drove and saw you. Even if it was just for 5-10 minutes, I would have just drove and said hello to you.
No, I was just outside Cambridge, and then we went to a wedding that was just outside Worcester. So We've
Worcester?
had by Birmingham.
No way.
Connor lives in Worcester.
That's
Well,
literally-
You know Ledbury?
yeah, very well.
That's where I was. It's
As
very
if.
cute. It's adorably cute.
Oh, no way. We could have done this live, like properly live. As if. What a small world this is. Just to bring you up to speed, John. So we're talking Bo Risa. We're just talking about, obviously she had a good season. We're just speculating really as to where she kind of fell out of favour, because like I mentioned at the start, we had that really good run and she was really pivotal in that. And then all of a sudden she fell away, and we were just saying that she didn't start any of the last 5 or 6 games. Can I just mention something as well, just before you move on? Everyone who is watching, just make sure you go and give Ellie some love. I know, Ellie, you've had a tough time, especially on TikTok, which is, just idiots on there. Just ignore them, and you know where we all are at All for United should you need anything. But yeah, that's where we're up to, John. I don't know whether you've got any of your thoughts on what we've just said there.
We wanted to speak about the positives from last season and how we can bring them into this season coming next season. And I do think Bo Risa is one of those. And just as I was setting the computer up, I heard you talking about maybe Tooney. For example, if Tooney wasn't on form, then bring Bo Risa in. And that's absolutely one way of looking at it. Jackie as well seemed to be, when she was fit, she was always starting and the first to be subbed. His starting level was quite rigid at times towards the end of the season. I think last 3 or 4 games, you can kind of predict that starting 11. But me personally, Bo Risa kind of impressed me more than some of the other midfielders this season. It's just a shame that we didn't see as much of her. Why that is, I don't know. But for me,
I think it's his system. It's
it's
his system, and his also like he did seem to be very mindful of mitigating goals. To the point sometimes it seemed that the offensive side kind of took a hit, and I would argue Risa's better on the offensive side. And I also think when he did this at Orlando, there was a while where he seemed really rigid, even though he was supposed to have a side that was going to be flexible to every opponent. So I think it's just his system of of the personnel he had and how he tried to use it. And again, because of the type of position she's probably best at, didn't fit with those 2 almost 6s. And
But can you see that? So can we see that changing then next season? Because Hayley Ladd's still going to be the best CDM. If Katie Zellum starts off the season the way she finished last season, she needs to start. It's going to be cries for Tooney to start no matter what. I can't see him changing his formation. I still think he's going to go for 3 midfielders and 3 more forward-thinking players. So, just stick it with yourself here, Catherine. I mean, can you see Bo Risa trying to force a way in? It's going to be very tough.
I think it depends who stays and who goes. Because if what's her name? Battle? Not Battle.
Oh, the Bache.
Yeah. I think if I really do think it depends on will Jackie stay and who stays and who goes? Will he be able to actually get a clear out and out striker? Because that would change his capacity in the attack, and then it would change his ability to maybe have his offense be a little bit more flexible. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I really do think we'll find out in the next couple of weeks, because it'll depend on the personnel he's going to decide to target.
Sorry, can I just make a quick point on this? Are you talking about the system there? Because it kind of ties into Lanzo's comment here about she can't get ahead of Jackie, but does she provide better balance in the Skinner system? I actually think she does. I think Bo Risa adds better balance, which is why I've said, people call it controversial. I don't really care. My balanced midfield 3 is Ladd, Zellum, and Bo Risa, because that seems to work. That 3, you have your 2-8, in a Skinner system, as we keep saying. That seems to be the way he wants to play, and it allows the fullbacks to get more involved, which, as we know, Skinner wants to do. So I think when you've got a player like Zellum and Bo Risa next to each other, because of their football intelligence is so high, they're almost on the same wavelength, so it works together. Whereas I think with other players, it almost throws that out a little bit.
This is purely speculative, but I do wonder if one of the reasons she was relegated back and Jackie was put forward ahead of her is because Jackie's contract was expiring, but Bo Risa still has a year. So it's I'm going to plead, because you don't want to lose a Jackie Gronin if you have her. So I'm going to please a player because if you put Jackie on the bench, she's going to go somewhere where she can play. I do wonder if maybe that came into play in his decision making. Maybe not. But yeah.
I can agree with that. Yeah, and it also makes me think that as well. Did we kind of play this kind of style or this kind of way purely based on some of like the players that we've got actually at the moment? So will we see next season something slightly different where we can bring in his own players? So maybe that will kind of open things up a little bit. He might have had a look at his team and thought to himself, well, they're not brilliant at my way just yet, but they can adapt to that way a little bit more. Whereas next season, where he's got maybe 5 people plus maybe 1 or 2 that he'll keep from the January transfer window, maybe it will open up a few more doors. And we'll see. But I do genuinely think that Bowies needs extra game time next season. And if that's ahead of Jackie, then for me, so be it. They can fight it out, definitely. Yeah, but I do agree with that, Catherine. I do. Jackie, that could be a point, couldn't it? It really could, yeah. So obviously we touched on Boavista. I think one of the other success points of last season that we'd like to bring into this forthcoming season is just how well the youth have done as well. So I appreciate 2 or 3 have obviously left and either gone to America or gone to Norway or gone elsewhere, but we've still got a fantastic setup. And I was chatting to a player that plays for Birmingham development team, and they said even before this season, Man United were seen to be the best academy team, and that was ahead of Aston Villa and Chelsea, and that was before this season. So obviously, Man United development team have got are really well thought of. They've won a couple of things this season, great to see, and we've seen the likes of Carrie Jones come through. We've seen even some of the youngsters like Fuso had a better season this season than the previous season. So I just want to kind of open up a conversation there about maybe how we can kind of get more out of those next season and what we can do going forward there. I'll let Catherine have a bit of a break and a bit of thinking time on that one and let you start off with that.
Oh, this is going to sound really controversial. I don't think any of them are going to... I think there'll be 1 or 2, but I don't think there'll be many coming through next season, because next season, the pressure was on Skinner this season mainly by fans who didn't really give him any time. They were made their mind up before he'd even started. But I think next season is where he'll be judged. And I don't think he can, if they're good enough, then yeah, by all means throw him in. But I don't think he can throw in some of these youngsters in games where next season we are really going to have to push for it. I'm not saying if we don't get top 3 next season, it's a failure. It isn't. But it depends on the circumstances. I think we need, the pressure is going to be even more, especially if he has a good window. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the transfer window. If he has a really good window and gets the players that he really wants, then the pressure is going to be ramped up. So I don't think he will be looking at it too much. I think he still will, because I think he is that type of manager who will try and get players in through the academy into the first team. But as you've said, a lot of the top tier ones that we had in the developments, I keep calling them the development squad academy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of them are moving on. And I think that is better for their own careers. It's correct. Because I don't think they're going to get a whole... There's just not enough games. There's simply not enough games in the WSL to constantly rotate. Jackie, we're just talking about Boavista and Jackie. They're not even starting games. They're not getting as many minutes. So are you going to give some of these 17, 18-year-olds who haven't had a single WSL minute a chance in key games next season? I'm not too sure. Sorry to put a negative on that, but I think you will try, but I just can't see it.
I also think that the same issue that occurs with the academy level and the Premier League, that the difference in quality also exists arguably now between the academy level and the WSL. That is a massive jump in quality to try to integrate and to learn your way up. You're almost better to go abroad and play professionally somewhere else in a league that's above the academy level but below the WSL, gain experience there, learn to fail, and then get better and then come back when you're ready, because there's very few players that can go directly to that level. Even if you look at Arsenal squad, they love to tout their Arsenal created players. But if you look, there's really just Williamson who was able to make the jump from academy straight to the first team. Ruben Moy, Patton, they went over to America, spent 3 to 4 years there, getting a degree and playing before coming back and playing in the WSL. So I don't think this is necessarily a Man United problem. I think this is a general problem where the academy level to the pro leagues it's just a massive jump. You either need to go championship or national league, gain experience, and then try your luck. I don't see many players being able to go directly.
Yeah, I just think. Sorry, John, just very quickly. I think because Barry's saying there, I can't see him starting unless it's Conti Cup. We look at the group we had in the Conti Cup this season. You couldn't. I mean, Durham was the only really one, and that even then that was tough. Away at Durham, that was a tough game in itself. And then we had City, Everton, Leicester, WSL sides. So you couldn't really throw. And the way the group was, because we made it difficult against Durham, we had to win those games. So it got off because we lost to Leicester, didn't we? So it's even then.
I just don't see even compared to the League Cup on the men's side, the Conti Cup on the women's side, I would argue is a lot more difficult in terms of the quality because they don't put their youth players or their number 13 to that's not what they do. They're still starters starting in the Conti Cup for every club. And on the FA Cup, you might get a club that's a lot lower, but you can't have an entire season based on one or two chances of actually getting included in the side. So, yeah, I can see players getting I don't know with Brexit now if loaning players to the EU market is as easy, but I can definitely see players trying their hand in Sweden and Denmark and Norway, gaining experience there and then coming over. If you look at the amount of players that have come over just from Sweden and Norway in the last year, the WSL, Borisa is a great example. The quality is really high there, but there's chances for players to make that transition without having to do kind of a massive academy to first team league. Hello?
Oh, is he froze? I don't know whether John's froze or what's.
I'm not too sure if you can hear me because my Wi-Fi's going a little bit slow. So, Connor, if you can hear me, just keep talking.
Yeah, I can hear you, John. We can both hear you. But here we get technical issues. It wouldn't be an United John show.
I know it's turning to me, and it always seems to be a Thursday. Something in the area must happen on a Thursday because it doesn't happen any other day of the week. I don't know what it is, but it's fine again now. I think. Touch wood. Catherine, there was just something that this is just completely off topic, but it's interesting, and I think you might be able to give a way of looking at this. We talk about going to different countries, and I mentioned going to America, the United States. I know a player who's in a development team. Not going to name a name, but it's in the WSL, and she's going on a 4-year scholarship to the United States. Mm-hmm. That 4 years. And I know it completely depends on so many different things, but do you think in that 4 years in the in the NWSL, is going to be more valuable to potentially staying in England and then going on loan to the Championship one season, going to WSL? It's so hard to say. I thoroughly know there's so many variables.
Personally, I think if your goal is to be a professional football player, you shouldn't be going to America to play collegiate soccer, because one of the issues with collegiate soccer is it starts about the same time as the Premier League. So they have it starts early August, and then the season starts maybe the 10th to the 14th, so mid-August. And then the regular season actually finishes early November. And they're playing 2 games every week, but it's really just for a 2.5 month span. And then if you're on a good side, then you have the playoffs. And then during the off season, there's limits to how much they're allowed to practice with their side. And there's a lot of players that'll go play in the WSL, the W League or the US. There's different semi-pro amateurs, but there's a limit there on how much they can do because they can't necessarily travel to games if they still have university. Even now, the best players are actually bypassing college and going straight to the NWSL. Here in Canada, they're actually our best national team players are being suggested don't go to the collegiate system if you're good, go straight to Europe if you have a passport or the capacity and points to actually do that, because the way to develop as a professional footballer is to play games week in, week out. So I would say maybe for some players, it might still be a great route, especially if you want to get a world-class degree, if you want to learn how to compete, because the level of competition in the States, they're ultra competitive and they're very much about winning. But I would say it would have to depend which university you go to, who your coach is. Like if you're going to a North Carolina or you're going to a Stanford, you're going to get a great education, and the football there is hard because year in, year out, those sides are going for a championship. So you're going to get like a season that's going to be about 4.5 months long where you're just burning 2 games a week. But
Charlotte, North Carolina.
no, it's University of North Carolina.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the one.
It's with Anson Dorrance, who used to be the coach of the and if you actually look at like the current women's national team, the U.S. women's national team, there's like about 20% of players went to that university, which is insane if you look at the statistics. You know, same with UCLA. So I think there's certain programs, like a great example, Jessie Fleming. She was a 4-year starter at UCLA and then transitioned to the WSL, and she speaks about that period as being really important for her own personal development. So I think it's dependent on the player. Like if getting education is important for you, then it's the best of both worlds. But if you want to be a professional football player, it might actually be better to bypass it. And now that football has become a lot more professionalized. So if you look at like Jordan Ketema, joined PSG age 18, and she's playing week in, week out. That's what you need to develop as a player, I think, not just a 4.5 month season. So,
no, thanks for explaining that one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll speak to you after the show in the private chat, the one that she's going to, because I've got it written down. But yeah, no, that's good information. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this one, and I'll kind of start this because I know we'll look forward to this one as well. Something that worked well last season that I want to bring into this one. I'll put Skinner stabilising the ship. Obviously, he came in and I don't know if it was all exaggerated last summer. I think it was, if I'm honest. However, there was a lot for him to kind of level out a little bit, and I think he did a real good job of that quite quickly as well. You know, I think pretty much before the first league game, things were quite level again. I think as soon as he came in, the media quietened down and turned into a little bit more of a positive, and I think that worked really well. So kind of bring you in on this one then. Obviously, kind of steady the ship last season. Can he kind of bring that kind of stability into next season and build on that now?
You'd hope so. It's like I said, I think he'll be judged more next season. I think, like I said it again, it depends what he gets in the window. Because if he doesn't get any of the players he wants, and it's a typical Manchester United transfer window, then I don't think you can put as much pressure on him than maybe they would have done. But yeah, I think he definitely stabilised it last season. Like I said, I think some of the stories were a little bit exaggerated because the whole Casey thing happened at the same time. Like I said, the Super League was happening and all the Glazer protests, and there was so much unrest everywhere. So I think a lot of journalists just tweeted a lot of news stories about United because they knew it would track. Like there was so many stories about United. Oh, this is happening. This is happening, and everyone believed it because the club was in such a bad state. So whether it was a little bit exaggerated, I think some of it was. That being said, there were definitely issues. Otherwise, Casey wouldn't have, in the way that happened. But Skinner did come in quite late. I've said this a lot, that, he did come in quite late in the window. He didn't get the player. Those players were not his, really. A lot of them were done prior to him coming in. So he definitely stabilised it. But yeah, you'd like to think going into next season, he knows the players now. If he gets his own players in, the ones that he wants, there's no reason why next season we shouldn't be looking to push on. But like I said at the start, just because let's say we don't get top 3 next season, that's not a failure. I think it depends on the circumstances. If we really fall off and we drop massively away, then I think you could look at it and go, okay, something's not right. But if we're very close again, it's not really a failure because our squad is still, even if we go and sign, 2 or 3 real world-class players, our squad is still going to be so far behind, Chelsea in particular. But even, look at City, look at what they're doing this summer, massive overhaul happening there. So, yeah, I think he's definitely stabilised, and there's no reason why going into next season. He's got the experience now. He's already had WSL experience, I know that, but he knows the players. He knows what it means to be Man United manager in terms of the pressure now. He knows us as fans now. So, yeah, he'll definitely take everything that they've learned this season and go into next.
Yeah, the Guardian ahead of the season had a really good descriptive. They characterized Man United's chances as being muted after everything that had happened in the last couple of months. And I would say, arguably, those expectations were far exceeded. Like a lot of people were wondering if it was going to be a make or break year. And I'd say it was, in the sense that you actually saw United and you started going, oh, are they going to become a top 3? Like, and they came very, very close last day. I think I have this little quote that's been hanging on our wall here that I think applies to Skinner. And it's, when you're having to deal with a situation, it's having the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom to change the things I can't, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's what Skinner did this year. He inherited something that wasn't his, and he changed what he could, and he tried to mute what wasn't working, or to deal with the limitations of the squad that he had. I don't think he's going to get the same leniency going into next year. His ability to recruit proper players in the off season and to actually challenge for that top 3 position, I think that's where we have to put him next year. Because this year was, like you said, a transition period, but it was also, I don't think there was a very high expectations going into it because of what happened and because of his recruitment.
Yeah, 100%. I think that was the point I was making there. I know John's Wi-Fi is playing up a little bit. I can see him just kind of glitchy, slowly moving across the screen whenever he moves. Yeah, I think that was the kind of point I was going for as well, that going into next season, oh, he's gone. Going into next season, he is going to have that added pressure. He's always going to have the pressure from a certain section of the fan base anyway, because like I said at the start, I think some fans made their mind up before he even walked through the door. But yeah, he's definitely going to be ramped up next season. And it's going to be tough for him because, like I said, if he doesn't get the players he wants, yeah, you could say we need to be aiming for that. And he'll put pressure on the players for sure, but it's how that translates onto the...
With the players that he has, there's only so much that he can do. And I think especially you need to score more goals. You need to score more goals. And in the top 3 sides, you need to mitigate the number of goals that you're allowing in. If you compare it to Arsenal and Chelsea, there was twice as many goals let in by United. Now, to be fair, about half of your goals were scored by Chelsea. So that's something that in the future needs to be corrected. But there's also the goals for, they had about 20 goals more than you did. And in the end, that's where your difference is. I think you need to get better on both ends if you really want to be in that top 2. If not, you're going to be battling for that 3rd place. And I mean, there's going to be a really big summer for a number of sides. It's going to be a big summer for Man City because at the moment you're saying they're having an overhaul. Well, the overhaul seems to be an exit door. That's what we're seeing. They haven't had anybody come in. I think Tottenham is actually really challenging to try to improve, and they have the capacity. So, this summer it has to be not we want to challenge for the top 3. It has to be we want to challenge for the top 2. I think it'd be done, but it's going to require proper recruitment. And the other thing that happened last summer is that you had good recruitment, but you didn't have exceptional recruitment, and you need to start bringing in players that are, arguably world class. And it's a catch-22 because you're not in Europe. You're not going to get that until you're in Europe. But to get in Europe, you arguably need those players. So it's going to be an interesting summer. You're back, John.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, bad Wi-Fi. It's all about the Wi-Fi. I'll put this comment on the screen from Charlie because it's something that I always think about, and this is where I could potentially over-defend Skinner. So let me just hear your thoughts on this one, Catherine. So yes, we could have a fantastic transfer window, bring in loads of players, but then if we get off to a bad start, me being me, I'm going to turn around and say, yeah, but it takes time for the players to gel. Is that a fair comment when you see what Arsenal kind of did last summer? They brought in a few players and they ended up pushing Chelsea right down to the wire with a new manager, or, but then on the flip side to that, you see what Everton did. They brought in a load of players and not so great.
I don't think you need to bring a load of players because I think you have a really good spine that's been built. It's improving upon the areas that are going to become weaker. So replacing, what's her name? Anna, I can't pronounce her name. Replacing her because alongside it's Blundell, that's the other fullback.
Yeah.
They supplied half your assists, and they were threatening the entire time, not just on the defensive, but actually pushing forward requiring teams to constantly react. If you continue with Skinner's system, he's gonna need to have those fullbacks at the same quality. I keep ramping up it. You need better strikers because you need to have more reliable sources of goals. But for the whole, I do think that you have a good spine. It's just reinforcing it and making sure that you properly utilize the quality that you have, including Borisa.
100%. Obviously, this is going to rumble on all summer until it's resolved. But Honor, to me, is one of the main reasons we score at all. I think you take her out of the picture, I don't think we score half the goals that we've scored this season because all of the attacks, or a lot of them, come down that side. Until Leah started firing later on in the season, nearly all of our attacks were down the right-hand side. So, which is ironic because we don't really have a right winger because since Hansen kind of got dragged out of it, she hasn't really played much in the team, and Martha Thomas got put out there and Tooney was out there, so for all of our attacks really to come down that side is an interesting one. It leads on nicely then, talking about goals, to our top 2 goal scorers, I believe, unless I've got the stats wrong, but I think they are. No, Leah Galton's in there somewhere, but we're not talking about Leah. Tooney and Russo. Obviously, they had a positive season. I think a lot of people would pick them for player of the season. Stay tuned Monday for that. But yeah, I think when we said at the start, Tooney's season kind of started off really good. The numbers she was putting up in the first kind of 6 or 7 games was unbelievable. I know she tailed off towards the end, but still a vital part. And Russo as well. I don't know whether, John, you want to start or go to Catherine first on this one, but their role going into next season, because we spoke about Borisa at the start, I think Russo's position's nailed on. I don't think anyone's going to come in and take over her. Tooney, you'd like to think the same, but surely if Borisa needs to get in the squad, if Jackie's going to be staying and fitting in the squad, then Tooney's position might be moved slightly or might be adapted. I don't know whether who wants to come first on that one.
I'll just throw in a couple of points on that one then, and then just let Catherine talk a little bit. But I think Russo has been fantastic. She's obviously getting her England call-ups now. She's been seen to be like probably one of the 3rd or 4th best strikers in the WSL. Fans have been saying if Russo had been playing for a top 3 club, she could have scored a lot more. I thoroughly agree with that. We had debates saying, should she play out wide? Should she play up front? There's loads of talk there, and I think she proved that she could do pretty much anything that she was asked. She had a very tough time sometimes with her back to the goal, had to track back quite a lot or come deep quite a lot for the goals. So I think we've seen from Russo that she can do pretty much anything. My only drawback is the injury that she had at the start last season. Has that gone into this season a little bit regarding fitness and fatigue? She does very often get subbed off after 60, 70 minutes, and that's not down to her ability. That is down to her huffing and puffing on the pitch. So I think that's the only watch out for me. I definitely agree that we need strikers to go there alongside her, whether that could be Tooney playing off her, something in a slightly different role, slightly different formation, potentially. She kept Sinja Brunette at the team. I know Sinja got injured towards the end of it, but even so, she completely outplayed any other striker on the pitch. So for me, Russo has done absolutely fantastic, and we need to, I wouldn't say build a team around her, but certainly build like an attacking force around her. As for Tooney, it's going to be tough this season next season because even though she started last season really well, the second half of the season she faded away. We've spoken about how many good midfielders that we've got already. We know that we've got Galton on one side. We'll probably bring in another attacker or forward player this summer. I generally don't know what the future has in store for Tooney, but it's definitely Man United because she's just so talented. She's going to play somewhere, but where her best position is, I really don't know, or not even where her best position is, where her position is to allow other top players to play as well, because that's obviously what you want to achieve, isn't it? You want some of your best players to be able to play with each other. So for me, I got nothing but admiration for both of those, and the fact that they're 2 best mates as well is obviously really good. Going to the Lionesses together as well, which is even better for them. So we just need to find a way to keep them both fit next season and to keep on playing to their strengths.
Yeah, I do think Tooney, it was really arguably her 2nd season in the WSL as a regular starter. Maybe she's still she's 22. She's still quite young. So maybe she is still trying to find her feet. But I think next year is a prove yourself or I don't want to say move over season, but I think next year she has to step it up again, and her stepping it up by being consistent. Yeah. Also, don't forget Leah Galton, because she actually scored more goals in the league than Tooney did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that was a so-called, like, not a bad season, I wouldn't say, but she wasn't like playing the same way as she was in the first couple of seasons in the WSL. It's a completely different style of play that she's playing now, and it takes a very intelligent player to kind of just suddenly change into the way Skinner plays. And I think Leah's definitely got that and proved that she can adapt to the game, because she, more than most, did have to adapt. That's the way it came across anyway. We always spoke on the show about natural wingers, and Leah and Kirsty Hansen being those natural wingers, but now the style of play is completely different. So for her to still, end the season as strong as she did, shows her intelligence as well. But kind of just bounce it back to you a little bit then. So next season, how are we going to try and get the best out of those three players, or what do we need to do extra to get more goals? Because that is the issue, isn't it? We need to score more goals next season.
It's all about balance, and this is why I say to a lot of people that you don't just throw 11 world-class players together and it'll work. You need a balanced team, and which is why, like I said, I say that midfield three for me, the Ladsell and Borisa, works because it's balanced. But obviously, where does that leave Tooney? So you're going back to that old debate. I wouldn't want to be Skinner, I tell you, going into next season, making all these decisions. But yeah, how do you get the best out? I think Russo, like I said, is nailed on. But the thing is, you've got to create more chances for it. You've got to get more crosses into the box. Like I said, if we lose Honor, you're going to lose 75% of our crosses, particularly on that side. So you're losing that threat. So we need a right winger or somebody to put out there, because I don't think Martha Thomas, I think she's been excellent and severely underrated, I think, as her movement, her intelligence to drag a player out of position, but she's not a right winger for me. So we need a proper one out there to match with Leah on the other side, because we know Leah's got a wicked cross on her. So yeah, it's really tough to talk about players without bringing back to what's going to happen in the summer, because obviously we don't know. So yeah, I agree with what Barry said. Russo need more deliveries and chances. Great. I think John, you said it. If she was in a Chelsea side, or if she was in an Arsenal side, she'd be on 15 odd goals this season, Russo, minimum. So I think we need to find a way of making the team balanced, because I think it tailed off, particularly on that kind of, and even earlier on the season when Skinner was. And I can see why, because he's new into the job and didn't fully understand his best 11. So he was always going to change, chop and change teams a little bit. But it's about finding the best out of your best players. And if that means upsetting one or two players and leaving some fan favourites on the bench, that's what he's going to have to do, because ultimately you need to get the best out of the team. You want to improve the individuals, and I think anyone would say that they've both improved this season as players. I think a lot of players, I think you can go back to Skinner, a lot of players have improved this season. So I think, yeah, it's very, very tough, because, like I said, Tooney, fair play to her as well, just on Tooney very quickly. She started the season in a position that she clearly didn't really want to be playing. It's clearly not her best one, in false nines, but she stepped up, didn't moan about it, got on with it, and look at the numbers she was producing from that position. So, yeah, both vitally important. We'd be nowhere near the top three if it wasn't for those two this season. So, yeah, it's just about trying to get the best out of them, but picking a balanced team around them. I'm going to be banging that drum all summer about trying to find a balanced team somewhere.
I'm going to go back to I think you need a striker. Like, that's one of the areas you need, because it's weird. Like, on Soccer Way, both Tooney and Russo aren't even listed as attackers. They're listed as midfielders. I don't know if that's I don't know why that is, but I do think they're maybe a little bit better utilized. You need somebody like a point person, just an extra threat up there, because while they're all good, I don't think any of them bring a threat that actually requires defense to always be on the edge of there can be a goal. I just don't know who you get.
It's interesting you say that, because we've seen Russo, particularly latter the second half of the season, she has dropped very deep. Now, I put it down to she's getting impatient, because we don't play the ball quick enough to the attacker. She just goes, oh, well, I want the ball, so I'm coming back. Like I compared it to Ronaldo. He does it all the time. Just drops so deep because he just gets so impatient. I think Russo does that, drops really deep. But what she can do from deep, I said it, she's one of the best in the league at picking the ball with her back to goal and on the turn. So she could play that role as but again, that's intruding into, and I think that's why maybe you saw Tooney drop off towards the end of the season. She still had a couple of goals and assists in there, but Russo was almost in her space a lot of the time because Russo would drop so deep. You want Tooney playing the balls onto a striker who's going to run in behind, and that's what Martha Thomas and Galton were good at. But you want, and I said this to you, John, so many, and Charlie were knowing Barry, and anyone who stood near me in a ground, the amount of times I've said, we get to the byline or we get out wide, there's nobody in the middle because Russo's the one that's putting the crosses in. So maybe it's that old argument, John, do we stick Russo back out wide or not? Because you want her on the end of the cross, but I don't know. I don't know how we best utilise them because she has come so deep this season, but then she's gone out wide and there's nobody in the middle. So that argument that we need a proper number 9 raised its head again. So, but it doesn't take away from the seasons they both had. Because like I said, we wouldn't be anywhere near the top 3 if it wasn't for those two.
Yeah, I mean, just to summarise, I obviously agree you do need more strikers, and if anything, just take the pressure off Russo, and where she doesn't need to keep playing the full 90 minutes, and you'll happily take her off after 60 or 70 and bring another world-class striker on or alternate them. So I agree with you do need that striker, whether or not they can all play at the same time. I think that'll be interesting. It really would, but it would be good to see, definitely. We spoke a little bit about strikers. Well, if you want to swap it now to the defence, because I think one of the good things about last season is even though our strongest pairing was out for quite a while of the season, if you have a look at our goals conceded, it matched Man City's. They obviously finished in 3rd, and we weren't like a mile away from Chelsea and Arsenal with what they conceded. I think I could be wrong, but it's probably about 10 goals. But over the course of like 22 games, it's not like a million miles away. So I think our defence, even though we was making like a makeshift defence, putting Zellum at the back, putting Ladd at the back, trying everything at one point, we still didn't concede that many goals. Few individual errors at the start of the season. Was that down to the style of play? Maybe they weren't comfortable, maybe they weren't confident, not too sure. But generally, over the course of the season, they got better and they looked quite strong. Mary Earps in goal had probably the best season that she's had with us so far. All in all, not a bad defensive season. Connor, do you want to start off with this one, mate?
Yeah, I can keep my points very brief. And I think, I've been a little bit critical of Mary this season, but she did keep 10 clean sheets, I believe, unless someone can correct me if I'm wrong there. And she's made it into pretty much everybody's WSL team of the season. There's a reason for that. I saw The Athletic before we went live. She's in theirs as well. She's in a lot of team of the seasons, and there's a reason for that. She had a great season. Mm-hmm. And as you said there, John, the fact that we've had midfielders in defence, we've had to sign an emergency centre back in Diane in January, and she came in and did quite well. We've had, like I said, our 2 best centre halves out all season, or half the season. So, yeah, it's been tough, but we've still kept a very good defensive record, which is something to build on because defence wins your titles, ultimately. Obviously, it didn't win us this title, but that's because of problems at the other end. So it's a good foundation to have, the fact that we're not conceding. But like I said, I do think a big part of that is obviously Mary having a good season. Obviously, Honor, fantastic. I think she's topping our squad in pretty much all of the defensive stats this season. So they've done well. They did well this season. They made a couple of mistakes, but like I said on the show we did last Thursday, I don't even think you could look at any player this season and say they've not made a mistake this season. They have. Everyone has. They were solid most of the season, considering it was makeshift. And you need partnerships over the pitch. And I think this is why we tailed off. I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think this is why we tailed off. Nobody could form a relationship with somebody else on the pitch, apart from that front 3 and Tooney behind. It was a different midfield combination every week. It was different centre-back pairing. It was, everything was different most of the time. So it was tough to build that. So the fact that the defence have come out strong, I think is a big positive.
Yeah, I mean, you were 15 to 20 goals off the top 3 offensively. The reason you were able to compete with them is because of your defensive. You only scored 22 goals on the season, which after Chelsea and Arsenal is the lowest. But if you take away those 2 Chelsea games, you've actually only scored 12 goals on the season because they lost, I think, 6-1 the first and 4-2 the second. Yeah. So that's really good. Arguably, that needs to continue. And what needs to change is, I think what I had calculated that 2/3 of the goals scored were from the top 3. So you need to mitigate. You need to be able to enter those games and know you're not going to concede. Which I think towards the end of the season, the last game excluded because he knew he had to win. But you saw it in that City game where it seemed almost like United was sitting back. But I think that was part of Skinner's play of, if we don't concede, then at least we can draw points. But if we put ourselves vulnerable, it's against those teams because they have such offensive power. It's so easy to concede. So I think that's the next step. You need to be, again, you need a striker, but you need to continue with that consistency and improve it when you're against the top three, where you're conceding like I think 2/3 of your goals this year.
And I'm sure some people won't see it this way, but I do see it this way. And another positive is we didn't lose against a team outside of the top three in the WSL last season. The previous season, we were getting upset. We were losing to like the middle of the table kind of teams, where at least this season, yes, it's a draw, but it's still better than a loss. And it felt like a loss because usually we'd be the team that's winning and then they pull back in the last 10, 5 minutes or whatever, and it feels like a loss. But the season before that we were losing to these teams as well. So, I'd like to kind of bring that up while we're talking about the defence. And if we can go into next season and not lose a game against a team outside of the top three, then there really is some scope there to build on it, because I'm sure some of those draws will turn into wins. I'm sure we might be able to get a draw against a City. We won Arsenal in the cup, so it shows that we can do that as well. So, just jumping on that one, Connor. I think there is definitely scope there to look at our defence this season and the games that we drew. If we can kind of build on that next season, then that helps us. That puts us in good stead as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like I said, the ones where we dropped points, the draws this season, were big individual errors. Now, don't get me wrong, every goal you ever concede, there has to be an error somewhere for somebody to score. There has to be, otherwise it just doesn't go in. But when I'm talking about big individual errors, that's what what cost us in the big moments. And City, Chelsea, Arsenal don't have those big. They have them once, twice a season. We had 8 or 9 of them.
Well, arguably, they have them too, but they know they can come back and score 1 or 2, which is it's where the difference is being held at the moment. Is that Skinner has to be, I think, more on the defensive, because if you create an error, you don't have that reliability up front yet to know you can come back from it quite rapidly, if that makes sense.
And also,
go on.
No, just very quickly, and then come straight back in, Connor. But also, just on that, I think maybe teams were set up differently against us if they did think that we was like more of a threatening team. So, for example, if they look at the Arsenal and Chelsea lineups and they see how many goals that they score per game, they probably set up differently to kind of almost like invite pressure because they're too scared to be hit, or get played around. Whereas they probably look at us last season thinking, okay, well, they keep it tight, but they don't score too many goals. Apart from that purple patch of just before Christmas where we was banging in a few goals. We're not really a team that's known to score loads of goals, are we? But go on, Connor.
Yeah, no, that was similar to the point I was going to make. I think, like you said, teams set up differently if you're on the front foot. And like I said, I think Skinner's had to set up this way. And I think he did as well. I think we've seen his style occasionally this season. I think, coming through in moments in games, he likes to say. But that Chelsea game at the start of the season definitely knocked him back and certainly knocked the confidence of the squad. I know, obviously, we built on that and we went on that good run December, January. But I think as well, like I said before, mentality plays a key part. And particularly in that back line, there was a lot of goals we conceded late earlier in the season. So towards the latter end of the season, when it started, I'm talking like West Ham here, Man City as well, Man City away. We didn't really have that belief that we could see the game out because we dropped so deep for a start, and we didn't have the belief because in the back of their minds they're probably thinking, "Hang on, we've been here before," and they don't trust themselves enough to go and get a second and third. We say it with Man City all the time. They get the first, second and third is coming within 5-10 minutes because that's what they do. They blitz teams. And then in the second half, or later on in the game, they don't need to hang on because they're 3-4 goals up. I think that's something for next season. We've got a good defence or a good defensive unit, but it's about getting 2 goals ahead, 3 goals ahead, so the defensive unit isn't under pressure so much that it's only 1 goal every single, or 0-0 as it was at City away.
Yeah, I think there's something for like having a historical tendency of always being able to win, which 4 seasons after being created to be where you are is quite impressive. But I don't think you've passed that hurdle yet. Whereas City and Chelsea and Arsenal, they've been doing this for not so much City, but for nearly a decade, and it shows in their squads. Like you said, they know that they can come back, which isn't necessarily something that United is at yet. I think that's where they need to go next year. Is the idea that because the moment that if we do get, we will keep fighting, but to the point, and we can keep fighting, and not relying on like the system that is so regimented that sometimes kind of sat back. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah.
Just by saying that last little thing there, you kind of answered my last question. I was going to say, obviously, we've mentioned things that's been good last season to bring into next season, but what can we do next season that we've never done before? Just like realistic. And you kind of said throughout the show, Catherine, about getting a top class striker. I agree with that. And also, I just like set it up in a way where we can come back from a defeat or come back from a draw, or just that kind of mentality. I think that's definitely one thing. Kind of putting you on the spot. What do you think? Something that we haven't.
When I say top class striker, you need a point person that'll scare defenses, and that will not, because there's you don't really have that at the moment. You need, they're so rare, like a Minima or like but somebody that that if the ball goes up front, there's a danger there at all times, and that makes defenses line up differently. It also makes the options going forward line up differently. You need that, or you need to have a unit that can go on the counter and that is known to be able to go on the counter quite well. And being that you've lost, what's her name? How do you pronounce her name? Battle.
Yeah, just say Anna. Just say Anna.
Meaning that you've actually lost a huge striking capability there. So I think you need to rebuild that, and you need to find a point person, somebody that, like I said, that will keep defense on their back heel, because they know they have to be able to go the other side, which at the moment you don't necessarily have. But yeah, I think the whole thing, it has to be from being into this, can we compete in the top three mentality, to we are in the top three mentality, which I don't think United has really surpassed that.
That last line is exactly that. It's exactly it going into next season. We need to stop looking at ourselves as, even though we are officially and factually, or whatever you want to look at it, we are technically the outsiders. If we really want it next season, we need to look at ourselves and go, no, we're not. Because I think this season we all got a bit, as fans we go into, but I think maybe the players bought into it a little bit sometimes, that oh my god, we're in the top three. What do we do now? Like, we need to start establishing ourselves, going, well, yeah, we're in the top three. We deserve to be here. And that I think that mentality let us down this season. Not that the players didn't. I'm not saying the players didn't. But it does play in the back of your mind. If you've got that 1% in your mind going, what if we mess up here? We're going to drop out the top three. Whereas the traditional top three don't have that. They don't worry about, it's fine. Look at City, 14 out of 15 wins they went on to get back into the top three at the end of the season. We need to get that mentality shift of, we're the outsiders, to know, screw that. We're going for it next season, and we know where we want to be, and this is where we deserve to be as well.
I think that's where having like a historical tendency of winning, and that kind of that winner competitive at all costs, I think that's where you're not at yet, in part because it's quite a young club for the WSL era.
It's tough as well to find, because every single, like we mentioned City as well, every club this summer is going to be looking for that striker, that player who can win them the game. And can we compete with that Champions League for these top level players to break us into that top three? They're hard to come by.
I'll give you one name, Fenna Kalma. I wonder where she's going to go. She scored 33 goals in 24 in the Dutch league in 24 games. Yeah, and she's a point striker. And she's only 22. She's younger than Tooney. So, and her contract's up, so it's going to be interesting to see.
I'm going to be tweeting loads of Dutch flags in a minute.
yeah. Write that one down. Yeah.
I do think like this is one of the things. It's not just the WSL that's competing right now. It's all the European teams. Like even I think Minima said when she accepted her 1 year. And by the way, nobody does a 1 year contract extension promo video like Arsenal. but she basically said she had better offers, but she wanted to stay in this competition, and I think that is indicative of, you know, when you're talking about Real Madrid and that there is a lot more competition now in Europe that might not have been there. So somebody had said you have to pull out the money. Yeah, I think you're going to have to pull out some money if you wanted to compete. There's talent out there, but it's just about bringing it in. And I think that's where I could see it's maybe a limitation for Skinner, is that he might have people he wants, but will he be given the budget to be able to surpass that in the same way that Chelsea have been doing for 6-7 years now, and Arsenal have been doing have restarted doing, and City have also, like, that's another obstacle I think that is kind of limiting your ambition. It's pull out the money.
We are going to wrap it up.
Sorry, everybody needs a good Cuba Gooding Jr. quote.
I need to watch the show back as well, because I've just literally just come straight in. I missed the first 10 minutes, so I need to get back into it. But yeah, we will have to wrap it up. It's 9 o'clock. We're later than usual anyway. We've started an hour later than normal. But Catherine, once again, thank you very much for joining us. Love hearing you. You're very similar to the likes of Barry and Charlie, who are both in the comments right now, and I think you're very logical in the way you talk and all this kind of stuff, which is very similar. Well, I feel it's very similar to me, Connor. But I don't know, maybe we're blowing our own horn a little bit too much there. But it's great to listen to you, Catherine. And
well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again to everybody in the comments. Plan for the rest of the week. So we've got the Friday Night Fans Forum tomorrow as usual. We have got Saturday Night Live this week. Having spoke to Matt, so I believe that show is on. And then Monday, just want to quickly go through. I know you haven't got a proper plan for it yet, but something roughly what's going to happen on Monday.
Yeah, so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if it is going to be one of the last shows talking about last season. We'll start looking ahead now to the Euros and transfer windows and everything else going, obviously, and then looking ahead into next season as well. But we have closed the voting now because, the player of the season voting, it is officially closed after I'd made all the graphics, and then John sent me his late last night, and I thought, great, I've got to change the graphics now. So I changed all the graphics around. But yeah, we'll be talking about all of that on Monday night. It's a lot closer than I think people might think, but I'm not going to reveal anything about it. We're going to reveal our top 5, talk a little bit more in depth about the individual players that have made that top 5 and some of the reasons why they're in there. But we've had a lot of votes, and it's a lot closer than I thought. So yeah, that's going to be a really good show to announce our Wolf United Player of the Season and our top 5 as well.
Excellent, yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we will catch you again tomorrow night at 7, and we shall see you again then. See you soon.